Hello and welcome back to Cinema Wellman. I am your host, David. Thanks for joining us again here at Cinema Wellman. And I just want to mention something. Andy, the head of our music department here and composer of the official theme song of Cinema Wellman, will be playing with his band Joyride at the 603 Brewery in Londonderry, New Hampshire on the evening of Friday, May the 5th. That's Cinco de Mayo for those of you keeping score at home. I will be there, and the reason I mentioned Andy and the music is at the beginning and the end of every episode of Cinema Wellman, we play the official theme song of Cinema Wellman. And if I could, I would have a musical score that goes throughout the episode, but I'm not that advanced yet. And today's episode is about music. So music can be a huge part of a cinematic experience. It can be such an integral part and component of a movie that the score can sometimes make or break an entire production. Wrong score for the wrong time period, an 80s techno pop synthesizer soundtrack to a movie set in medieval times is not going to work. Lady Hawk. Music is used by filmmakers for a variety of reasons. They use it to intensify a mood, add to the suspense that they're creating, play with our emotions a little bit, or even pump us up for a good action sequence. You've probably seen clips on YouTube where they switch the score of an iconic piece of film and entirely change the genre just by changing the music. With the right musical alterations, you can turn the Muppets Take Manhattan into Jason Takes Manhattan. Music and movies are pretty much inseparable, and I'm not even talking about musicals or movies about music. That's a totally different animal altogether, and that's going to be a totally different episode or series of episodes, probably. What we're going to talk about today is the score of a movie or lack thereof. Before we get into it, let's do a little quick reminder of the difference between a movie's soundtrack and a movie's score. The soundtrack, simply put, a movie's soundtrack is all of the sound found in the movie. This would include not only the unbelievably expensive popular music used to aid in storytelling, but also the dialogue recorded on set and the overdubs, as well as all sound effects and the movie's score. Soundtrack is not just the collection of music used in the film, it's all of the sound. The score is music that is tailor-made for the film, usually written by a composer who's been specifically contracted for the production. Think John Williams, for one, or Bernard Herrmann, or Max Steiner, Hans Zimmer, Dmitri Tiomkin, Ennio Morricone. There are a lot of them out there. Movies with classic scores include The Magnificent Seven, Star Wars, Blade Runner, The Last of the Mohicans, Lawrence of Arabia, The Godfather, Sunset Boulevard, and Jaws. And I have The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is another example. Star Wars mentioned. I have quite a few of these, Lawrence of Arabia, Sunset Boulevard, and the whole Jaws thing going on here at Cinema Wellman. It's hard to imagine any of those films. Think of Jaws without the score. Think of The Last of the Mohicans without the score. It's so hard to imagine any of these films without their now famous scores. Equally hard to imagine is any movie being great or even remotely interesting without a good score, but that's exactly why we're here today. Today's episode is going to take a look at 10 tremendous movies that are scoreless. Here are 10 instances where filmmakers eschewed adding music to their films for one reason or another, and the results are incredible. Without using music, a director needs to go elsewhere for their important sounds. Directors will rely on natural sounds, such as a car horn, sirens, footsteps, nature sounds, be them animal or weather, screams, or even a ticking clock. to accomplish what other directors make happen with the music of a movie's score. Well, since the clock is ticking, let's get started. These 10 scoreless movies will be presented in chronological order. We will begin back in 1931, right around the time when the silent era was ending and talkies were all the rage. Our first film on the list is from 1931, and it is Frankenstein. Director James Whale's classic film starring Boris Karloff as the monster remains one of cinema's greatest horror films. Dozens of adaptations of Mary Shelley's novel have been done over the years, but very few come close to this early entry in the Frankenstein cinematic life. The movie features a song over the opening and closing credits, but the film itself has no score. Whale expertly uses sound effects in the place of music to build suspense and to add to our level of fright. Whether it's a storm raging outside the laboratory, itself crackling with sounds of its own, or the heavy footsteps of the monster himself, sound is extremely important in this scoreless film. You would think a gothic horror film would need music in order to fully immerse the viewer in the, goth of it all, but it's amazing that this movie stands the test of time without the benefit of a score. Well done, director James Whale. Well done. Also worth a look is the 1998 film about James Whale titled Gods and Monsters. Highly recommended, especially if you're still not convinced that Brendan Fraser can act. He actually can. The next film on our list is also from 1931, and it is simply titled M. Fritz Lang directed this suspense thriller starring the great Peter Lorre as a child murderer. While researching movies for this episode, I ran across M and was surprised to see it listed. I had seen it a couple of times, and I could have sworn that it had a score. In the name of research, of course, I watched it again, and I misremembered that Laurie's character whistles in the Hall of the Mountain King several times during the movie. Music? Yes. Score? No. Creepy as hell? Hell's yes. If you're not familiar with In the Hall of the Mountain King, it's from I think it's Peter or Peer Gynt Suite. I'm probably mispronouncing all that, but it's dun 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 dun. And in this film, you know that song. You're familiar with it, even though I probably butchered it. Peter Lorre's character, the child murderer, whistles this on several occasions. It's super, super creepy. So how does Fritz Lang spin this compelling web of a suspense thriller with only creepy whistling as a musical accompaniment? This seems like an impossible task, and yet he does it, just like Peter Lorre in M. Next on our list is from 1948, and it is Rope. Since I'm pretty much claiming it's extremely difficult to make an amazing film without a score, it's certainly no surprise that the movies on this list were directed by some of cinema's all-time greats. James Whale, Fritz Lang, and the next two movies on this list were directed by the king of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock. Still to come on this list are films directed by Luis Buñuel, two by Sidney Lumet, and a Coen Brothers film. Like I said, some heavy hitters on this list, but that's later on. Let's first talk about Rope. Rope is on my top 10 list of Alfred Hitchcock films, and I'm always recommending it to anyone who will listen and who likes Hitchcock and has overlooked this one. It was once part of a monthly theme, when I used to do themes, of claustrophobic movies, since the entire film takes place in one room. Murder, dinner party, and all. The suspense Hitchcock creates is impressive, even by Hitchcockian standards. From IMDb, two men attempt to prove they committed the perfect crime by hosting a dinner party after strangling their former classmate to death. Who was in attendance at this dinner party? How about the victim's parents? How about the victim's girlfriend? This is awesome, awesome stuff. The victim is in the room for the entire movie. He has been hidden in a chest on which the dinner is served. This heart-pounding, claustrophobic film is as tense as you can get. Now, Jimmy Stewart is the name on the marquee, but the real stars of this movie are Farley Granger and John Dahl as the killers, Philip and Brandon. The tension Hitchcock creates is edge-of-your-seat stuff. Since you witnessed the murder during the opening scene, it's like you're an accomplice to the crime. This is one of the best suspense thrillers I have ever seen, and Hitchcock does it all without a score. Just like he does in our next movie, which is from 1963, and it is The Birds. The quote by Hitchcock on the movie's poster, "It could be the most terrifying motion picture I have ever made," is saying a lot. And he may be right. What does he add to the recipe, his usual recipe that amps up the terror in this one? Well, birds. Lots and lots of birds. And in lieu of a musical score, we are treated to the squawks of scores and scores of birds who are out to end humans for some unknown reason. Maybe Hitch would have used music from the death metal band out of Baltimore called Hatebeak. Had they been around in 1963, he may have. The lead singer of Hatebeak is an African gray parrot named Waldo, and he's tremendous. But I digress. One of the main reasons The Birds works so well without a score is Hitchcock's use of all the natural sounds, including wind, the ocean, and of course, those avian marauders. An excellent thriller that will have you looking sideways at any gathering of over 3 birds, and rightfully so. Birds can't be trusted. Next on the list is from 1967, and it is The Exterminating Angel. Here comes the father of cinematic surrealism, Luis Buñuel, with a fantasy horror story about a group of socialites who gather for a dinner party and for the life of them just can't leave. The Exterminating Angel would also be a very appropriate inclusion for a claustrophobia film festival, since a vast majority of it takes place in the room these people cannot escape. They also cannot explain why they cannot escape. There is nothing in their way, and yet they cannot and will not leave the room. One of the critics featured on the movie's poster uses the word ferocities in his blurb. Well done. That pretty much explains this gem about the rich and the etiquette they follow. Buñuel once said that if he made this movie in France, he would have included cannibalism. The ending takes place in a church, and it's tremendous. Buñuel makes statements about class and religion, and he does it all without music. He also does it without slicing open anyone's eye with a straight razor or having a character with ants crawling out of a hole in his hand. Been there, done that. Next, from 1975, is Dog Day Afternoon, the first of back-to-back films on this list, directed by longtime friend of Cinema Wellman, Sidney Lumet. Let's take a moment to officially thank Sidney Lumet for giving us 12 Angry Men, The Pawnbroker, Failsafe, The Anderson Tapes, Serpico, Prince of the City, Death Trap, The Verdict, and the next 2 scoreless films on our list, Dog Day Afternoon and Network, which Lumet made back-to-back in 1975 and 1976. Thank you, Sid. Just thank you. Like Frankenstein, Dog Day Afternoon features a song over the opening credits, but the rest of the sound is all natural. And in Dog Day Afternoon, there's a lot of it. New York City and its sounds should be given top billing. I've already mentioned this film in an earlier piece, in an earlier episode and list, so I won't rehash what I've already said about it. Suffice to say that this may be a film that not only wouldn't work with a score, I don't think it could work with a score. It's perfection from Sidney Lumet. And then he followed it up in 1976 with Network. So here's more Lumet with Paddy Chayefsky's Oscar-winning and eerily prescient story of where television was heading and what people really wanted to watch. The cast is amazing. Network took home 3 acting Oscars, Faye Dunaway, Beatrice Straight, and Peter Finch. Finch won his Oscar posthumously, and Straight's performance was given as if she was double parked. Only 5 minutes and 40 seconds of screen time, and she won an Academy Award. Must have been a great performance. I watched that movie, and her performance, although very, very good, is not one of my top 15 or 20 takeaways of this, but that's for another time. In any event, Sidney Lumet pulls all of this off without the benefit of a score. There honestly wasn't any room for it, with the media making so much noise during the entire movie. They just never know when to shut up. Next is from 2005, and it is a French film titled Caché, or The Hidden. This French film, directed by German director Michael Hanke, is a wild ride exploring privacy, surveillance, and creepiness. Juliette Binoche and Daniel Auteuil star as a, quote, married couple who is terrorized by a series of surveillance tapes left on their front porch. Thank you, as always, IMDb, for that synopsis. I did not have time to watch this again before this episode because of the job thing. I forgot how much time working took out of my everyday life. But I will be screening this again soon and will pass along any added insights if they pop up. In the meantime, it is well worth a look. From 2005, Caché. Next, from 2007, No Country for Old Men. The Coen brothers' film No Country for Old Men is actually the inspiration for this entire episode. When I saw the film when it came out, I was so impressed with the natural sound the Coens used to help further their story. I think the shot that stuck with me the most was the one of a candy wrapper and the sound it made on a store counter as it unwrapped itself after being crumpled up. It sounds simple, but it was quite magical. This film is listed as a crime drama thriller on IMDb, but I consider it a classic Western told in modern times. The lack of a musical score only intensifies the starkness of the setting and the despair of the characters. I'd really like to watch this movie again soon, but I have to be honest, Javier Bardem is terrifying in this, and I'm afraid if I watch it again, he'll know where I am. There are no clean getaways. And last on our list, from 2014, The Tribe. If you have ever met me and had a conversation about movies with me for any amount of time, really, chances are you've heard me rave about this film. The least remarkable thing about this film is that it doesn't have a musical score. I saw this Ukrainian film 4 years ago, and I honestly think about it at least once a month. At least. This movie was mind-blowing. Let's start with IMDb. Quote, a deaf boy joins a boarding school for similar children. Confronted by the violent and criminal antics of some of the other boys and girls, he struggles to conform and join the tribe. Not only does this film lack a musical score, all of the actors in it are deaf. The film makes no use of any vocal language. The actors communicate with each other using sign language, Ukrainian Sign Language. And if you know American Sign Language, you would only know about 70% of Ukrainian Sign Language. There are no subtitles of any kind. The viewer is left on the outside of a silent world in more ways than one. This is really one of the most unique film experiences I have ever had. Hearing the actors sign their lines with the changes in their breathing and the sounds of them creating the signs themselves was amazing to watch. The ending of this film was so harrowing and upsetting and disturbing that it left an indelible mark upon my soul. I am not exaggerating. If you think I'm exaggerating, contact me and I'll describe the ending to you. It's some wild, wild stuff. I actually might make that next week's episode, just make it a quickie, 5 minutes of me spoiling the ending to the tribe, just because I want to talk about it. And on that note, it's a wrap here at Cinema Wellman for 10 Scoreless Movies, or music. We don't need no stinking music. Thanks, as always, for joining us. We hope you'll be back next week when we're either going to finally get to that gambling movies episode, or we might just spoil the tribe for you. In any event, until then, take care.